So recently, the trust in the process has reached new lows. And due to the snowball effect of this team's offseason this year, has left a lot of fans scratching their heads at the confusing direction of which this team is going. Are they in the trajectory with a better chance to compete for a title next year, with their co-star accepting his player option on standby for an awaiting trade? That, depending on the exchange, will free up cap space for them going into next year's free agency, or with the hiring of a new coach and the constant migraines behind Embiid and Harden's constant playoff meltdowns, will this franchise embrace the opportunity of trusting the process in a cleaner slate, in potentially building their draft capital and investing more into younger players to go in a different direction for their future? Most likely a future involving them trading away their best players. And before speaking on what potentially could happen next for the Sixers, let's just touch on a little bit the pending decisions that they will have to make that will drastically shape the next 2 to 3 years of this organization. Firstly, addressing their draft capital. In this year's draft, they didn't even own their own pick due to the blockbuster trade that landed them James Harden, and currently don't host any second round picks in the 2023 and 2024 draft due to them dealing with tampering violations in their signings of last year's offseason with PJ Tucker and Daniel House, with the Stephian rule prohibiting teams from trading their first round pick in consecutive drafts, and this franchise dealing their 2025 first round pick for George Hill back in 2021. Severely limits their flexibility with their trade assets involving their picks, as their only available pick that they can involve in moves is their future pick in 2029. When it comes to their contract situations of their core players, both Tobias Harris and Tyrese Maxey are approaching the final year of their contracts, which could add more fuel to the fire in how up or down a team might perceive their value going into next year's offseason based off of how well they play in this upcoming season. Tobias Harris, for example, who is recognized around the league as a productive third or fourth scoring option, but an option that becomes a lot more confusing in terms of his scoring value for his inconsistencies on the offensive end in the playoffs, and overall in the eyes of Philly fans who always involved him in trade rumors due to him not living up to the expectations that came with him signing a big-ass contract in 2019.
Tobias Harris over me?
So far this offseason, 5 first-round picks from the 2020 draft class have already signed their rookie contract extensions, solidifying their spot as cornerstones with their franchise. But for the Philadelphia 76ers, not only does their patience game in signing Maxey to his contract give them more flexibility in the offseason of 2024, as next year they will have enough salary cap room to sign 2 more max contracts. And if Maxey can continue to ball out and live up to the star potential that he showed glimpses of off of the heels of his breakout season last year, then I see no reason why Philly or any other team wouldn't throw him back his way to be a young offensive centerpiece in their system. With more consistency of the responsibilities he will have on the offensive end, especially with Harden being gone, if he can prove to be a suitable second option next to Embiid, then he may become the next prospect from that 2020 draft class to sign a big bag extension with the organization that drafted him. And when it comes to Joel Embiid, despite his recent comments, still has essentially 3 years on his contract with a player option going into the 2027 offseason. Though in this year's free agency, they would lose vital pieces to their rotation, in Georges Niang heading to Cleveland, Jalen McDaniels signing a 2-year deal with the Toronto Raptors, and Shake Milton heading to Minnesota, with eventually James Harden being on the move as well. On the receiving end, they would sign pieces such as Patrick Beverley and Mo Bamba, both on 1-year contracts, along with bringing back their backup big and Paul Reed and re-signing him to a 3-year deal. Signings that were originally intended to be complementary pieces to a contending roster. Until, niggas wasn't really messing with their situation anymore. In a recent interview with Maverick Carter, when asked about his offseason and future career goals, Joel Embiid would casually release a statement that would spark the internet on fire and amplify the concern of his future with the 76ers.
I just want to win a championship, whatever it takes. I don't know where that's going to be, whether it's in Philly or anywhere else. I just want to have a chance to accomplish that. I want to see what it feels like to win the first one, and then you can think about the next one. It's not easy, but it takes more than 1 or 2 or 3 guys. You got to have good people around you every single day. I work hard to be at that level so I can produce and make it happen, so every single day I'm working towards that goal.
And would double down on this quote when virtually checked by fans on the subliminal coding behind his message, but would fall back on his trolling reputation that he has on social media. For one, niggas is not buying it. And most importantly, number two, I don't think Joel Embiid fully understands how fortunate he is as a superstar to be part of a franchise that has tried in several efforts to surround him with pieces to contend that should have accomplished at least one memorable postseason, but have been nothing but consistent second round exits, and instead have been on the wrong side of some historic playoff moments. Overall, struggling to keep their offensive consistency from the regular season to translate it into the playoffs, and usually make poor decisions against teams with strong lines of secondary defense and solid defensive chemistry. Even more specifically when it comes to Embiid, who goes from an MVP caliber center during the regular season to eventually dealing with some type of injury that hinders him throughout their playoff runs, that forces his numbers to go from superstar levels of efficiency to just a solid center at best, along with being one of the most unreliable superstars in playoff elimination games. It definitely doesn't help your playoff chances keeping James Harden around, who literally carries the same type of reputation in the embodiment of an aging guard. And speaking of Harden, not to violate, because bro will always have his legacy stamped in the NBA long after he retires as being one of the league's best scorers and for transitioning into one of the best playmakers in the NBA in the second half of his career. But at some point you just gotta wonder, like, is there any championship DNA in this man's system? I just find it pretty wild that this man was jacking that this was supposed to be the team that gives him his best shot on the championship, as if this man hasn't been on rosters with 3 straight MVPs and still struggles to make it past the second round of the playoffs. What amazes me is not only is this man acting out of another situation, but even more so the thought of there being better opportunities than the teams that he's already been a part of. With the 2 most popular destinations in rumors of his trade being the Los Angeles Clippers and the New York Knicks. Firstly, to address the Clippers scenario, as there is a small chance that he gets traded to either of these teams this offseason, but let's just quickly dive into the realm of both possibilities. While the addition of James Harden would easily make this team the best offensive lineup in the NBA, along with adding a new layer of shot creation and playmaking that they could use outside of Westbrook. And if you are a fan of the Clippers, I must genuinely ask this question. While James Harden will make y'all one of the best regular season teams during the season, do y'all truly trust a roster that consists of James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and Kawhi Leonard's injury history when playoff time comes around? And if your answer is yes, then 1, I will keep you deeply in my prayers for the abundance of disappointment you will face when postseason comes around. And 2, what available assets would the Clippers have in a hypothetical trade scenario with the Sixers that would help them with their win now situation? Like what? Y'all gonna give them Norman Powell, Zubac, Rocco, and some role players with some picks for James Harden? Like, I'm gonna just keep it a buck, bro. I don't think this franchise really even has the pieces to go after Harden in an ideal trade, especially for the standards that Daryl Morey is requiring to get him in a deal. When discussing Harden's trade at length on a local radio show appearance, Daryl Morey would state,
I do have a long relationship with him, and I am attempting to honor that. But the reality is, if we do look at a trade, it will be for one of 2 things. It's either going to be for a player who helps us be right there like we were last year, or we are going to do something where we get enough draft picks or things like that in a deal such that we can turn those into a player who can be a running mate with Joel.
Which in other words, in short, means that y'all NBA teams aren't finna finesse us because of a desperate situation. And this isn't Ben Simmons. If you aren't involving your best players in the move or a boatload of picks, then you ain't getting shit. And a situation that now has the Sixers stuck between a rock and a hard place, as this move definitely can make or break their entire summer. With the main question being, what can you get back from a trade for a nearly 34-year-old all-star caliber guard who can elevate a team's success on the offensive end throughout the course of a regular season, but outside of some outlier performances can be just as much of a liability on both ends of the floor in the majority of a playoff run. Even if he comes back to Philly or goes to Los Angeles, what team is he really about to give a strong chance of winning a championship? With the inconsistency in the efforts he has off the ball on both the offensive and defensive end. As for the potential of a James Harden trade to the New York Knicks and how he will contribute to their playoff success in the future, Anyways, as for the two favorites amongst this supposed exchange, in Zach LaVine and Damian Lillard, in my opinion, I don't see either option moving the needle significantly, as in the first scenario with Damian Lillard, you would be acquiring a better playoff performer, but you would also be running the liability of running him in the backcourt with Tyrese Maxey, and whether you want to trust that defensively with your pickup in Patrick Beverley. And again, this is best case scenario if they didn't have to involve Maxey in the trade itself, as they already giving Miami a hard time in the Tyler Hero trade, and obviously that's Lillard's preferred destination. Of course, we have to consider that for Philly to make a move with any star in the exchange, in order for the contracts to align in the deal itself, they'd have to include big contracts such as Harden or Tobias Harris, alongside them having to go to the limited resource of future draft picks in a potential move, which would make it an even bigger risk because one, not only would that trade deplete their depth, but two, you would only have the next 2 to 3 years of Damian Lillard's contract, including the fact that he's 33 years old, for you to complete the task of winning a championship within that window of time frame. The roster as is really isn't, in my opinion, to become contenders even if they acquire Damian Lillard, although the duo of him and Embiid would become very intriguing. Furthermore, for the second option with LaVine, although it would be granting you more athleticism and youth, and at least more duration and time in terms of the tenure of his contract, as it would be expiring around the same time as Embiid's, I still don't see him moving the needle as much as well, just because of the lack of playoff experience and the injury history that Zach LaVine has on his lower body, along with the fact that he's not an amazing defender as well. And in the exchange, you would be losing your primary playmaker as well as one of the best passers in the league to acquire yet another score-first guard. As for the Sixers' options in next year's free agency, if they decide to plan for their future around next year's offseason, I believe the best available difference makers they could seek for in next year's free agency, in hopes of a last attempt of putting another star around Embiid for more playoff success, could be players such as Jaylen Brown or Pascal Siakam if they aren't traded or re-signed by their current franchises. Both players are often thrown around in trade rumors and could potentially use a change of scenery, as well as building a solid reputation for remaining healthy in both the regular season and playoffs, and both players haven't proven to be above average off-ball scorers, playing alongside primary scorers at this point in their career. And although the final outcome for them in this previous playoffs isn't the best campaign or reference point for these signings, they're still good on-ball defenders while being smart defensively on when to switch, and in the past 2 seasons have shown tremendous progression in their shot creation ability and with handling more on-ball responsibility. So with all of that being said, is the issue in Philly stemming from the fact that there is a missing piece to the process? Does it allude to the fact that they're heading towards a rebuild, and perhaps we may be seeing the start of a new process? Or overall, is there a misunderstanding from the media based on recent events and a quote that was casually said in a casual interview that is being over-exaggerated? In all I know is that if there's anything certain about this whole process, is that they need to come to a decision this summer on what direction they are going in, with Joel Embiid at the helm of this franchise in the prime of his career, before coming to the final ultimatum on whether to trade him or continue prioritizing building playoff rosters around him until he is dissatisfied with the result by the end of his contract and could potentially internalize leaving in free agency for absolutely nothing. If I had a decision and choice, I'd go with the option to trade him. Not only would trading him sooner than later give the team of choice more time to build a winning roster around him due to the tenure of his contract, and of course the factor of him being at his peak, but also because the nigga's just tired from seeing this dude straight well and whenever this team has needed him most in playoff situations. From the very start of his playoff runs, dating back to as far as 2018 in a second round series in Game 5 where he would get a turnover on a layup attempt very late into the fourth quarter. Overall, he had a solid performance, but in the second half of this game would shoot 1 for 6 and score a total of 4 points. Then you got the crucial Game 7 performance of which he shot 6 of 18 from the field and then had one of the all-time playoff highlights shot in his grill and ended his season. The 2021 playoff run where they were the overwhelming favorites against the Atlanta Hawks, and infamously remembered for when he kinda blamed Ben Simmons for the final outcome of that series, when he was the one that missed the game-winning layup in Game 4 when they were up 2-1, Then in game 5, in an opportunity to tighten up the scoring late in the 4th quarter, despite having an amazing performance of scoring 37 points, would miss back-to-back free throws, which eventually ended the game with Atlanta coming back from a 26-point lead. Then in game 7 would get an extremely clutch turnover that would completely destroy the momentum of them coming back from a 2-possession lead late into the 4th once again. You combine those moments with his most recent elimination games against Miami and Boston in the previous 2 playoffs, you come to the conclusion that while he is arguably the greatest scorer in the NBA, the guy is just not him when it comes to the playoffs. And you further realize that our reigning MVP has never really proven to us otherwise in a playoff series against legitimate contenders out east. And that'll be the end of this video on that note. Let me know what you guys think of the future of Philly's franchise, commenting down below your thoughts on the best possible solution for their current situation, because at the end of the day, there's no wrong answers. If you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, because this is about hoops and we be talking about hoops, and you know we get litty in this section. And until next time, I'ma holla at y'all. Y'all be easy.